the calculations of personal costs. A few basics to start with. You know that personal costs are direct costs, right? So directly linked to the project, has to be justified. And then within that, we have two major sections. One is the actual, okay? So that based on the salary slips and so on, you can actually prove that this was the amount that was paid to the employees. And there's the unit-based personal cost category, which is for the average personal cost calculation. The average personal cost calculation is beneficial for those organizations that have a lot of people, and those many people are actually also participating in research projects. So when you want to calculate the hours for the lab technicians or the administrators or the junior managers in an organization, then it is easier for you to do a specific calculation for your organization on an average for the different type of cost categories, the personal categories, and then use that set by the beneficiary on a beneficial level and use that for the calculation of the personal cost in Horizon 2020. Related to the same thing, the unit-based personal cost calculation, we have two other categories as well for the unit-based calculation. One is the SME owner rate, and the other one is the natural person rate. The natural persons are you and me. So if me as a Gabriella Lovas, I want to participate in a Horizon 2020 project as a beneficiary, I could do that. I do not have to have a legal entity behind me. In that case, the grant agreement will set the specific rate for Gabriella Lovas participating in a project and receiving a salary. And I just have to report the units, basically the number of hours that I spent on the project. The hourly rate will be given in the grant agreement. A similar methodology is for the SME owner rate, which means that those SMEs who have owners, but they are not receiving a salary from the SME itself because they are normally paid from the dividends, as an example, then those people can also work on Horizon 2020 projects and do research work, as an example. And then again, the rate is set in the grant agreement based on the numerical reaction rates. So these are the three categories that are for unit-based personal cost calculation. In this 1 hour, we have no time really to deal with these categories. So we will focus on actual personal cost. Regarding actual personal cost, again, we have three specific categories. The employees, or those that are having an employment contract that is based on your national rules and is considered as an employment contract by you. So those ones will be then also accepted by Horizon 2020 and by the European Commission as an employment contract. And that will be then considered as an employee in your organization so that you are able to report actual personal cost on that. The second-hand employees, on the other hand, are not employed by you. Those people are employed by a third party, so another organization, another legal entity, and then you are making basically an agreement with this other legal entity that they will, so-called, let's say, lend you that person for a specific period of time to do specific tasks. And then the costs have to be reported of that person. Exactly the same cost that the person is receiving from its own legal entity by which is employed, okay? In order to be able to do that, obviously you have to have the necessary calculation done at the legal entity, and you have to have the proof that that was actually the cost of that person. And this is what you will report also in the second-hand employee contract, okay, in Horizon 2020. That is again specific cases when you need an expertise, and maybe there's a university and there's a university research hospital, and then they are basically having a second employment contract all the time between each other, and they know how exactly that has to be done. With an opportunity that you are just discovering now, that's not specifically the case what we are recommending you to do. Normally, these are kind of arrangements between organizations that know each other and know how they report each other's personal costs, because they are anyway linked somehow. Maybe not legally linked, but still linked somehow with cooperation. But obviously, this is an opportunity still that you can use. And then we have the in-house consultants section. In case of in-house consultants, you can work with natural persons, and those natural persons can issue an invoice. This is important because in several countries, that category is based on different rules. So, for example, in the Netherlands or in Belgium, you do not really have the category of one-man company or self-employed person. While this is the only case when actually a natural person can be contracted, and that natural person can issue you an invoice. There are several other requirements as well that you have to fulfill in order to have an in-house consultant contract. Basically, that is when you need an expert, that expert is self-employed, and that expert can work under your conditions based on your rules, but still can issue you an invoice. And that invoice will be then reported as a direct personal cost. If that person, for example, is employed by a third party and the third party, a legal entity, is issuing you an invoice, then it's going to become subcontracting and not an in-house consultant. And then you do not have the overhead on top of those personal costs. Okay, so there's a major difference. I'm telling you these two things because we will not talk about seconded employees and not talk about in-house consultants anymore. Again, within 1 hour time frame, this is what we can integrate. Okay, so let's focus on employees and those people who have a contract that is equivalent to an employment contract. So, who and what can be included, right, is a basic thing. So, the project personnel working at a beneficiary and assigned to the grant. What does it mean, assigned? If the person is assigned full-time, then there's a declaration. There's a template that you can download from the Funding and Tenders portal, and that template has to be filled in at the time of the reporting and has to be submitted with the report. If that person is assigned partly to the project itself, then it's based on your organization rules how you assign that person. In our case, my boss writing me an email, for example, that I will be assigned to this and that project from now on, that's the assignment. In case of a university or a major research organization, your rules could be completely different, and then you have to follow those. What does it mean, an assignment? Maybe you have to have an annex to the employment contract that tells that, or something else. You just follow your own rules, okay? Only in the case of the full-time assigned personnel, you have to fill in the declaration. Then what should be reported as a personal cost? The basic salary plus all of the mandatory charges and the taxes. All of those that are paid by the employee and all of those that are paid by the employer for the usual work and duties. This usual work and duties is important because some of the organizations have the system, so to say, or the methodology to have a basic salary for usual working duties, and then for each and every research project or each and every other type of project that the person has to work on, there is an additional contract signed. In those cases, you have to be careful what a basic salary can include to be reported on a Horizon 2020 project, and this is what we will also talk about in more details. And this is why it is important to understand that what is this national project reference and what is the action reference. So we will talk about more for those organizations who have this case of signing different contracts or having maybe within one contract different duties included and different work conditions included in the employment contract. Okay. So again, who and what can be included, right? There can be additional things that you can consider. So, what not? Basically, what is given only for the Horizon 2020 project, that's not. Okay? So, whatever kind of additional salary, maybe compensations for travel or compensations in terms of cars or whatever else, those could be included also as a basic salary for the Horizon 2020 project if they are set on a beneficiary level. Okay, so also these have to be actual, obviously. And there are some additional things that you could also consider to be included into the salary, such as overtime. If within your own rules, overtime is a possibility. It is allowed by the national rules and the organizational rules. You use the overtime system and you are paying the employees for the overtime. Then, of course, overtime is a possibility also for the Horizon 2020 project. Okay, and then the total salary with the overtime salary as well has to be calculated. then teleworking is also a possibility. Horizon 2020 accepts teleworking, so the employee do not have to work on your premises in a specific headquarters office, but they can work from home, or you can have the teleworking